I will not be penniless. I was meant to be rich. Beatrice screamed at her mother, Cheryl, who was digesting the news they'd just heard from their lawyer. Well, then you've got to win Fred back. And you've got to win him back now, Cheryl snapped at Beatrice finally. Are you sure that lawyer knows what he's even talking about? Beatrice stomped around her penthouse room at the Four Seasons Hotel, a grand view of Central Park in front of her. Yes, Beatrice. You are in the wrong here, Beatrice, I'm afraid. Cheryl shrugged. We both are, Mother. If I go down, so do you. Beatrice may have conned Fred after he woke up from his 3-year coma. She may have convinced him that they were in love and that she was the mother to that spoiled, rotten child, Jake. But Cheryl had done all the planning. Cheryl probably knew who Jake's real father was, but Beatrice knew better than to ask any questions. Cheryl had even gotten that sad, pathetic woman to be the surrogate, so that Beatrice didn't have to go through the ordeal of pregnancy. For Beatrice's part, she'd just shown up at the hospital and done exactly what her mother told her. But Beatrice and Cheryl both loved being rich, and were not going to give that up, no matter what it took. Suddenly, Beatrice stood up and walked over to the telephone in her room and dialed down to the front desk. Hello? What are you doing, Beatrice? You're wasting precious time here, Cheryl snapped. But Beatrice just ignored her until she'd hung up the phone, satisfied. Beatrice had made Fred fall in love with her once. She could do it again. And she would look good doing it, all on Fred's dime. I'm getting Fred back, she announced, flopping back down on her plush king-sized bed. Meanwhile, across town, Fred was still working on controlling Jake, but in the course of the new day, he'd seen something of a shift in him. Jake had suddenly become obedient. It's time to take your meds, Jake, Fred, Jake's father, urged, expecting another fight like the one they'd had the day before. But Denny Murphy, who was pretending to be Jake Smith, just nodded and held out his hand, his beloved finger puppet on his finger. Fred smiled. He didn't know what happened to his son, but he liked this change in him. The medication must be working, Fred thought. Fred knew that keeping that useless Dr. Quinn away from his son had been a good idea. She deserved that suspension. Really, he should have had her fired. But then, Fred stopped himself. Why did he keep thinking about this Dr. Quinn Murphy? Meanwhile, Denny put the pill in his mouth. Fred handed him the glass of water. Denny took a sip. Fred patted his head. Good job. Fred patted his son's head. The meds make you feel better, don't they? Yeah, I guess, Denny agreed. However, just then, Fred's phone rang with a work call, and he turned away from Denny to answer. Denny swiftly took the pill off his tongue and hid it in the finger puppet, just in time as Fred soon bounced back into the room, announcing, All right, Jake, come along now. It's time to get ready for school. What school do I go to again? Denny asked earnestly. But Fred just laughed and shook his head. Very funny. Come on now, get dressed. Your teacher is waiting for you. But seriously, what school do I go to? Denny asked again. You're homeschooled, Jake. You know that. But what about friends? Like friends at school? Fred shook his head. Maybe those meds weren't working after all. Fred couldn't believe this. Jake had been homeschooled for his entire childhood. He'd never had any complaints. Look, I don't have time for this, Jake. I need to get to work. The teacher's waiting for you on the 3rd floor. Hurry along now. Unsure what else to do, Denny wandered his way towards the 3rd floor, all the while whispering to himself, Homeschool? What does homeschool mean? As Denny grappled with the strange world of the ultra-rich, Jake, who had taken on Denny Murphy's life, was excited to begin his first day of actual school. He'd never had classmates before, His father had never allowed Jake to attend real school. Now, Jake couldn't wait to make new friends. It was all he would talk about. "Are we going soon? I just can't wait to get to school. Real school," Jake told Quinn, Denny's mother, excitedly. "Well, I'm glad to hear it." Quinn smiled, holding Jake and Sammy's hands as they crossed Central Park to their new school. The school itself was a towering building where half a dozen or so kids in uniform were still outside, kissing goodbye to their parents and about to start their day. Jake stared at the school in wonder. It was massive and nothing like the dark single room with a supersized chalkboard that he took all his classes in back home. "I want to do everything. Musicals, basketball, track, art club, science club," Jake prattled on. "You hate science," Sammy interrupted. "No, I don't. I love it," Jake insisted. "Since when?" Sammy glared at her brother. Why was Denny acting so weird? He was never this excited about school back in London. "I don't know." "You're a liar," Sammy whispered to Jake. "Am not." "Are too." Sammy kicked Jake's leg behind Quinn's back. "Ow!" Jake kicked back. Sammy stuck out her tongue at him. Quinn took a deep breath and separated the two children. She loved her children more than anything. But right now, they were testing her last nerve. Just a few more days and she'd be back at work after this ridiculous suspension. How dare that annoying and stuck-up Fred Smith accuse her of malpractice? As if she would ever hurt a child. He was the one letting the child's mother hurt his own son. She tried to shake off the memory of Fred Smith, but she hadn't been able to keep him or his son Jake from her mind for more than a few minutes over the past few days. She really hoped that Jake was doing okay. She believed him, even if his father did not.
Hi, Quinn here, and if you're wondering what happens next, click on the link in the description to listen to the full audio series. You can also watch the next episode here in the playlist.